The Western Sahara region has a long and complex history of mostly nomadic tribes, living and warring throughout the centuries. This presentation is going to concentrate on the latest of these conflicts that originated in the early 1970s and continue to this day. It is important to understand that this latest regional violent outbreak can be traced back to the social disconnect of colonization and the subsequent destabilization of decolonization. In 1885, Spain announced that it had created a protectorate in Western Africa without informing the Sahrawi of their decision. In 1904, Spain gained territory formerly controlled by France after France and Great Britain came to an agreement over territory disputes in the region, again without consultation. Spain continued to maintain control over the Western Sahara region, however, with increasing unrest in the region. With the post-World War II decolonization occurring, Spain was less interested in keeping control of the Western Sahara. In 1975, Spain came to an agreement with Morocco and Mauritania on division of the territory, again without consultation with the Sahrawi. This was also instead of holding a referendum on independence. The Policiero immediately went to war with Morocco and Mauritania in order to win independence. The Moroccan and Mauritanian division of the territory was announced in April 1976, roughly a straight line running just north of Dakhla to the border near Sarat, Mauritania. The native population of the Sahrawi did not appreciate exchanging one occupier for another. Therefore, the insurgency that fought the Spanish turned their guns on the Moroccans. They were known as the Policiero and were a very capable fighting force. Less than a decade after Mauritania had withdrawn from the conflict and ceded the lands they had held in Western Sahara, the Policiero succeeded in beating back the Moroccans to control 85% of the Western Saharan territories. In a report on the issues of resources and international roles in the conflict facing the Western Sahara region, we've identified many of the factors taking place. Looking at these closer, we can see what has changed and what has remained relatively constant in this prolonged dispute. Focusing on what has changed since the Policiero Front began their armed struggle for independence in 1973, one of the first events was the Spanish promise of referendum. However, Spain reneged on their original intention and under pressure gave 2/3 of the Western Sahara region to Moroccan control and the remainder to Mauritania. Part of this pressure involved the Moroccan Green March, where it was organized for 300,000 civilians and military to penetrate and permanently install themselves in that region. This caused nearly half of the Sahrawi population to flee to Algeria and establish themselves in refugee camps, where they are to this day. By the 1990s, Moroccans outnumbered the Sahrawi in the disputed territory. The Policiero defeated Mauritania for control of their part of the country during their guerrilla warfare struggle. However, Morocco then annexed that portion of the Western Sahara as part of their southern provinces. The U.S. and France increased their support to Morocco and aided them to construct parallel sand berms stretching 1,200 kilometers, shutting out 3/4 of the country. The UN negotiated a ceasefire between the Policiero and Morocco in 1991 and installed the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara. Progress by the UN General Assembly has led to resolutions 1514 and 1803, which make it clear that the sovereignty over resources belongs to the indigenous people in a non-self-governing territory, and not the occupying force. The issue of self-determination has remained relatively constant since the 1970s decolonization from Spain. Originally, there was a question of independence under the Policiero leadership or integration with Morocco or Mauritania. With the defeat of Mauritania prior to the ceasefire, this bit of contention is no longer considered significant, and the debate is ongoing between Morocco and SADR. Resources in the region are increasingly being exploited or explored for exploitation by Morocco in this non-governed state. Recent pressures have diminished corporate involvement or investment from Western-backed organizations. However, the EU recently renewed a fisheries agreement with Morocco in areas off the Western Sahara coastline. Actions such as these are setbacks for the self-determination process. Morocco faces ongoing accusations of human rights violations. Zunes points out the similarities in this conflict to the self-determination process and violence experienced in East Timor. On top of this, there is a desire by the Sahrawi people to return to war. The full capacity of the Policiero is also unknown, as there is a strong capability of activating fighting-age people into its forces. Both main parties in this conflict argue development and preparation for governance in Western Sahara. Morocco claims to have invested more than $2 billion into the region, yet this can largely be seen in oppressive infrastructure and development. The Policiero created an extensive administration structure, including elected officials, schools, hospitals, and border posts for collecting duties. The major players in this conflict are Mauritania and Morocco as state actors, with Policiero as a non-state actor fighting for independence. Mauritania was not well positioned militarily or financially to prosecute an insurgency, let alone a conventional war. Mauritania therefore negotiated peace with Policiero while maintaining cordial relationships with the other elements within this conflict. Morocco is attempting to expand their territory and create a greater Morocco. In this endeavor, it has received extensive material, financial, and technical support from the United States, France, and other Western allied nations. Policiero seeks self-determination as an independent state. It has enjoyed immense support from Algeria. This support includes equipment, training, and a safe haven in order to regroup and plan further attacks. The group also benefited from Libyan support and were able to receive modern Russian equipment through indirect means. From inception in 1973, the Policiero movement was monofocal toward ending foreign domination of the Saharan territory and to create an independent socialist Arab republic. In later years, the ideology shifted from a social republic towards a democratic republic. They determined that military resistance was the way to achieve this goal. They agreed to a referendum on self-determination that excludes an expatriated Moroccan electorate. As the conflict dragged on, the Sahrawi suffered broad human rights violations and sought international sanctions against their oppressors. In 2004, Sahrawi formed an organization called the Sahara, branch of the Truth and Justice Forum. Their goal was to invoke an international commission to investigate and redress the human rights abuses within the conflict. The Sahrawi managed to shift public opinion toward their cause by publicizing rights violations, invoking international court decisions, and being judicious with the support they accepted from would-be allies. The Policiero sought to block the EU farm trade agreement that would send phosphates and fish to the EU duty-free. They claimed that Morocco had no jurisdiction and obtained the resources through tyranny. The court decided the resources of Western Sahara could not be included in Moroccan trade agreements, in that it would hamper the decolonization process. Morocco's overarching demand is that the disputed territories honor previous tribal allegiances to the former sultans of Morocco and be returned to Moroccan sovereignty. A demand was made in 1975 with the International Court of Justice to determine Morocco's ties to the territory before Spanish colonization. Consequently, the ICJ recognized Morocco's ties with tribes but not to geographic claims. Morocco agreed to a referendum but wanted settled Moroccans to be included in the vote. As part of their claim, Morocco demands the rights to the resources of the area and currently benefits from all commercial, fishing, and mining activity. The strategies employed in the Saharan conflict have evolved over the last 4 decades. The Policiero, the largest armed force representing the Sahrawi, started their resistance with guerrilla warfare in 1993 toward the Spanish, and later refocused to target Mauritania and Morocco. With nowhere to hide, guerrilla combat in the desert consists of networks of tunnels underground. Intermittent restrictions on mobility conserves fuel and equipment. Congregating also builds solidarity with shared stories. However, mobility is encouraged at other times to promote use of the lands and bolster the claim of ownership over territory. In 1982, the Policiero had reclaimed 85% of their territory thanks to a combination of guerrilla tactics and conventional military incursions made possible by weapons and equipment received from Algeria and Libya. As Morocco gained strength, the Policiero resorted to a strategy of harassment and spontaneous attacks. The goal was to prolong the conflict and break the will of their oppressor. They sought the support of the international community. The Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic were admitted to the Organization of African Unity, which paralleled to membership in the African Union. Their actions are often influenced by international political climates. The Policiero have shown a willingness to negotiate through the conflict by attending various negotiations, submitting to a UN proposal that would allow a referendum on independence, and subsequent compromise that would create a semi-autonomous state. In recent years, the Policiero have changed focus to peaceful demonstrations. Their hunger strikes have been met with beating, imprisonment, and torture. Their demonstrations met with police brutality. Noam Chomsky described the demonstration in Gadim Ezek in 2010 as the origin of the Arab Spring. There is, however, growing fear that the younger generation is ready once again to take up arms. It is clear that Morocco has been overtly and covertly aggressive. Let us review the timelines. In 1976, upon Spanish withdrawal, Morocco moved into the region swiftly. The military commenced a bombardment campaign targeting civilians. Approximately one-half of Sahrawi can link the bombings to the death of at least one family member. During the 80s, Morocco built a sand berm 2,700 kilometers long to set up perimeters around mineral deposits and to contain the Sahrawi. The wall was fortified with 100,000 troops and over 5 million landmines. King Hassan organized the Green March in 1995, when over 300,000 Moroccans caravanned over 600 kilometers into the territory to demonstrate their resolve. The march displaced over 100,000 Sahrawi who fled to the desert and were targeted with airstrikes for over 4 months. Subsequently, the Moroccan government has encouraged settlers to settle in the territory, complicating the election process for self-determination. Lack of mobility has changed the Sahrawi culture. Nomadic farmers can no longer migrate to their grazing lands, and traders cannot access trade routes. The Sahrawi refugees have become almost entirely dependent on international aid. Western Sahara is the world's largest exporter of phosphates and sardines. The defensive berm has situated the phosphate deposits and all coastal access entirely on the Moroccan occupied territory. Morocco has shown no tolerance for political dissent and has continually detained and tortured political foes. Morocco shapes the dialogue in the country. Sahrawi children within its borders are being Moroccanized in schools. To this day, officials will confiscate maps that delineate Western Sahara from Morocco, and the citizens must or have become unanimous in their support of the Moroccan cause. In 2006, Ban Ki-moon referred to the territory as occupied territory, which brought over 1 million demonstrators to the capital the very next day. What we know is that negotiations have failed to result in the recognition of Western Sahara by Morocco for the right of self-determination. Morocco has successfully blocked human rights monitoring despite the deployment of UN peacekeeping forces, regardless of the evidence of such violations. Globally, there is an interest in addressing these violations, although key actors, France, Spain, the US, Canada, have kept silent. The USA has a free trade agreement with Morocco, and Canada is in negotiation at this time. Canadian and American interests and local resources are now the focus of economic stability. The Americans pull oil from the two main basins, and the Canadian-owned Agrim has license for the phosphorus mined annually in disputed territory that is paid to Morocco. A review of the news channels and papers in both Morocco and Western Sahara confirm that both sides continue to blame the other. Social media is beginning to shed light on the degree of social unrest in both territories. Morocco is being strategic in their approach, joining the African Union in 2017 and quickly aligning with economic partners. By doing such things as growing greenhouse production in Western Sahara, utilizing their water and infrastructure, but Moroccan labor, you not only have shipments that can go to the EU, but it ensures ties with a broader slate of countries and contributes to the outcome of a potential referendum that is sought by Polisario. All agriculture is directly and indirectly owned by the royal family. It is Morocco who has successfully, under King Mohammed, in developing allies outside of the dispute to ensure economic partnerships. Morocco will continue to ignore sanctions, will not concede to pressure or adhere to agreements. The current growing unrest within the country in regards to the lack of jobs and the violation of human rights will continue to be monitored. Who will intervene? The UN continues to fail both the Moroccan and Western Saharan people by refusing to enact a human rights mandate. Countries with political ties such as France and Spain will not intervene, and those with economic interests such as Canada and the US are silent, at least until their access to resources are threatened. If only governments can commit a human rights violation according to the law, then a shift from government to corporate oversight may be inevitable. Regardless, deployment for peacekeeping will not address the dispute, as there is no political will, economic driver, or mandated concession in Moroccan policy to resolve the territorial conflict.